Did you know that a single decision can change the course of multiple lives? What would you do if you saw something that seemed wrong but couldn't prove it? This is the story of police officer Marcus Reed, who thought he was making a routine traffic stop until he met the frightened gaze of a girl in the back seat. What he discovered next would unlock a chilling mystery of loss, redemption, and unimaginable courage. Stick around, because the twists and turns of this story may make you wonder how far you would go to protect someone you love. Every year, thousands of children go missing, and for many, their stories are never told. What would you do if you only had a few seconds to decide whether to intervene? Let us know in the comments below. And don't miss the end of this unforgettable story. This opening combines emotional intrigue, urgency, and audience engagement, ensuring a strong start to the video. The suburban streets stretched ahead, bathed in the muted glow of streetlights. The hum of the patrol car was steady, almost lulling Officer Marcus Reed into a sense of monotony. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 8:37 p.m. Just a couple more hours until his shift ended. As he rounded a quiet intersection, a memory flickered in his mind. A 10-year-old boy's voice shouting after his sister as she disappeared into the woods. The image of Lila's face was still vivid after all these years, her bright green eyes filled with mischief. That was the last time he saw her. Shaking the thought away, Marcus refocused on the road. A sudden movement caught his eye. An old sedan rolling through a stop sign without so much as a pause. His hand instinctively reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4A. I've got a dark sedan ignoring a stop sign at Elm and Cedar. No assistance required." Flicking on the patrol lights, Marcus sighed. "Just another distracted driver," he muttered, pulling behind the car as it slowed to the shoulder. Marcus approached the vehicle, the cool night air prickling his skin. His boots crunched against the gravel shoulder as he positioned himself at the driver's side window. It rolled down smoothly, revealing a middle-aged man with slicked-back dark hair and a neatly pressed button-down shirt. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his piercing blue eyes. "Evening, officer," the man said, his voice warm, almost rehearsed. "Is there a problem?" "You rolled through that stop sign back there," Marcus said, his tone neutral. "License and registration, please." The man chuckled nervously. "Of course, officer. My mistake. Long day." As he reached for the glove compartment, Marcus glanced into the back seat. A little girl sat rigidly, clutching a well-worn doll to her chest. Her blonde hair framed a pale face, and her blue eyes darted around nervously, never meeting his gaze. "This your daughter?" Marcus asked, addressing the girl. "You doing okay back there?" The girl's faint smile faltered as she whispered, "Yes, sir." The man interjected quickly, "This is Emily, my daughter. We're just heading home after dinner at my sister's place. She's wiped out, as you can see." Marcus nodded, though unease prickled at him. Emily's hands gripped the doll tightly, her knuckles white. Something about her posture seemed wrong. "Where's home?" Marcus pressed. "Just outside of town, near Meadowbrook Lane," the man replied without hesitation. His calm demeanor was too polished, too perfect. Marcus handed back the documents after a cursory glance. "Make sure to come to a full stop next time. Drive safely." The man thanked him, pulling away with a smile that didn't match his eyes. Marcus stood on the shoulder, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. His gut told him something wasn't right. Back in his cruiser, Marcus tapped his pen against the steering wheel, replaying the interaction in his mind. Emily's stiff posture, her darting eyes, the way she recoiled slightly when the man spoke to her. It gnawed at him. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4A. Requesting a plate check on a dark sedan, license plate 4A3X992. Just for peace of mind." As he waited for a response, Marcus jotted down notes in his notebook, the phrase, "trust your gut," looping in his mind. It was advice he'd given rookies for years, but tonight it carried the weight of something he couldn't quite place. The radio crackled. Plate registered to Victor Langston. No priors. Address confirmed. Meadowbrook Lane. Marcus frowned. On paper, everything checked out. Still, the knot in his stomach tightened. The precinct was quiet as Marcus sat at his desk, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. He uploaded the dashcam footage from the stop, leaning closer to the screen as the video played. The grainy footage captured Victor's calm smile, Emily's rigid posture, and the way her hands clutched the doll like a lifeline. Marcus slowed the playback, studying her face. His eyes widened as he spotted her lips move ever so slightly. He rewound the footage and zoomed in. The words she formed were barely perceptible, but clear enough to send a chill down his spine. "Help me. Damn it," Marcus muttered, running a hand through his hair. He pulled up the state's missing children database, his heart pounding as he scrolled through the profiles. A photo stopped him cold. Emily Harper, age 7, missing for 3 days from Ridgefield, a town 50 miles away. The description matched perfectly. Grabbing his radio, Marcus called dispatch. "This is Officer Reed. We've got a possible Amber Alert match. Plate 4A3X992, Victor Langston. I need an APB issued immediately." Marcus's cruiser sped through the streets, sirens silent as he replayed the details of the stop in his mind. Victor's polished demeanor, Emily's desperate eyes. It all painted a picture he couldn't ignore. The radio crackled. "Officer Reed, we've got a tip from a diner waitress south of your location. She spotted a man matching Langston's description with a young girl earlier tonight." He seemed agitated. Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "Send me the address." As he approached the diner, his resolve hardened. This wasn't just about solving a case. It was about making sure no family endured the pain he'd carried for decades. And tonight, he wouldn't let another child slip away. Marcus's cruiser screeched to a stop outside the diner, its faded neon sign flickering in the cool night air. Inside, the clink of dishes and low hum of conversation greeted him. He approached the counter, where a waitress with tired eyes and a name tag reading Linda was wiping down the surface. "Evening, ma'am. Officer Marcus Reed," he said, flashing his badge. "I believe you called in a tip about a man with a young girl?" Linda straightened, her brow furrowing. "Yeah, they were here about an hour ago. He ordered coffee and a burger. The girl, she didn't say much. Just sat there holding a doll." Marcus leaned in slightly. "Did anything about them stand out? Anything unusual?" Linda hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the door as though afraid someone might walk in. He seemed jumpy, kept looking around like he was afraid someone would recognize him. And the girl, she looked scared. She barely touched her food. "Did you hear him mention where he was going?" Marcus pressed. "He was on the phone at one point," Linda said, lowering her voice. "Said something about finding a place to stay. There's a motel down the highway, Lakeside Inn. It's not exactly 5-star, but it's close." Marcus nodded, scribbling the details into his notebook. "Thank you. This could really help." As he turned to leave, Linda called after him. "Officer, that girl didn't look safe with him. Please find her." "I will," Marcus said, his voice firm. Back in his cruiser, Marcus dialed Sarah Tate, his trusted partner and fellow detective. Her voice came through the speaker, sharp and alert. "Reed, what's up?" "I've got a lead on Langston," Marcus said, steering onto the highway. "He was spotted at a diner south of here. Waitress overheard him mention looking for a place to stay. I'm heading to Lakeside Inn now. You think he's hiding out there?" Sarah asked. "It's worth checking," Marcus replied. "His pattern fits. He's not going to risk going far with that girl." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice softened. "Marcus, are you sure you're okay to handle this? You've been chasing ghosts since Lila." "This isn't about Lila," Marcus cut in, his tone sharper than intended. "This is about Emily. I'm not letting another child slip through my fingers." "All right," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I'm heading your way. Don't do anything stupid until I get there." Marcus smirked grimly. No promises. The Lakeside Inn was every bit as grim as Marcus expected. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, with weeds poking through the asphalt. A flickering neon sign buzzed faintly in the still air. He parked a short distance from the motel and surveyed the lot. His pulse quickened as he spotted a dark sedan matching Victor's car. The license plate confirmed it. 4A3X992. "Dispatch," Marcus said into his radio. "I've located the vehicle linked to the Amber Alert. Lakeside Inn. Requesting backup." As he waited, a faint light flickered behind the curtains of room 12. Marcus squinted, his sharp hazel eyes locking on a shadowy figure pacing inside. The sound of a car pulling up made him glance back. Sarah stepped out of her unmarked vehicle, her dark curls tied back in a no-nonsense bun. "You were right," she said, nodding toward the car. "That's him. Emily's in there," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I saw movement in the window. She has to be." Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "We can't rush in without a plan. If he panics—" "I know," Marcus interrupted, his jaw tightening. "But every second we wait, he could hurt her. Or worse." The door to room 12 creaked open, and Victor stepped out, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He glanced around, his movements tense and deliberate. "This is it," Marcus whispered to Sarah, who nodded and drew her weapon. They moved silently toward the room, sticking to the shadows. Before they could reach the door, a sudden movement inside caught Marcus's eye. Emily bolted from the room, her small frame silhouetted against the faint light spilling out. She clutched her doll tightly, her blonde hair flying as she ran toward the woods behind the motel. "Emily!" Marcus shouted, breaking cover. Victor's head snapped toward them, his eyes narrowing in recognition. He turned to chase after Emily, but Marcus was faster. He tackled Victor to the ground, pinning him with a practiced motion. "Stay down," Marcus growled, cuffing Victor's wrists. "She's my daughter." Victor spat, thrashing against Marcus's grip. "You're making a mistake. You can explain that downtown," Marcus shot back, hauling him to his feet. He turned to Sarah. "Go after Emily. I'll handle him." The forest loomed like a shadowy maze, dense and foreboding. Marcus's flashlight cut through the darkness as he followed the sound of rustling leaves and distant cries. "Emily," he called, his voice echoing through the trees. "It's okay. I'm here to help." A faint whimper reached his ears, and he quickened his pace. His heart pounded as he spotted her small figure crouched near the base of a tree, trembling. "Emily," Marcus said softly, lowering his flashlight. "It's me, Officer Reed. You're safe now." She looked up, her wide blue eyes filled with tears. He said he was going to hurt me if I ran." "No one's going to hurt you," Marcus promised, crouching down to her level. "But we have to get out of here. Can you walk?" Emily nodded, clutching her doll as she stood. Marcus extended a hand, and she took it hesitantly. A rustling sound behind them made Marcus freeze. He turned sharply, his flashlight catching a shadowy figure moving between the trees. "Stay close to me," Marcus whispered to Emily, his hand moving instinctively to his holster. The shadow grew closer, and Marcus's grip on his weapon tightened. But when the figure stepped into the light, he realized it was Sarah, her gun drawn and her face set with determination. "Found her," Marcus said, relief flooding his voice. "Good," Sarah replied. "Let's get her out of here." As they guided Emily back toward the motel, Marcus glanced over his shoulder, the eerie stillness of the forest sending a chill down his spine. Something told him this wasn't over yet. The forest seemed alive, its gnarled trees twisting into shadows that danced with every flick of Marcus's flashlight. Emily's small hand trembled in his as he led her cautiously through the dense underbrush. The faint crunch of leaves under their feet was the only sound until Emily whispered, "He's still out there, isn't he?" Marcus crouched, turning to face her. "I won't let him hurt you," he said firmly. "But I need you to stay quiet and stay close." Emily nodded, clutching her doll tighter. Her wide blue eyes darted around nervously. Just as Marcus rose, a rustling in the distance made him freeze. He gestured for Emily to hide behind a large tree trunk. "Stay here," he mouthed. The rustling grew louder, closer. Marcus drew his weapon, his heart pounding in rhythm with the distant footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a dark hoodie with a blade glinting in his hand. "Looking for me?" the man sneered, his voice low and mocking. "Drop the knife," Marcus commanded, his voice steady. "Now." The man stepped closer, his posture low and predatory. "You've got no idea what you're stepping into, officer. This isn't just about that girl." Before Marcus could respond, the man lunged. The knife slashed through the air, narrowly missing Marcus's chest. Marcus sidestepped, striking the man's wrist with his flashlight. The knife clattered to the ground, but the attacker was relentless, tackling Marcus to the dirt. They grappled, rolling across the forest floor. The man's strength was fueled by desperation, his wild eyes fixed on Marcus with a feral intensity. Marcus managed to pin him down, his knee pressing into the man's back. "Who are you working with?" Marcus demanded, twisting the man's arm behind him. "Where's Victor?" The man laughed, a guttural sound that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "You're already too late." A sharp elbow to Marcus's ribs broke his grip, and the man wriggled free. Before Marcus could regain control, the man bolted into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. Marcus scrambled to his feet, panting heavily. "Emily!" he called, rushing back to where he'd left her. Relief flooded him as he found her still crouched behind the tree, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you get him?" she asked softly. "No," Marcus admitted, frustration tightening his jaw. "But we're not done yet." Guiding Emily deeper into the forest, Marcus kept his senses sharp. Every crack of a branch and every whisper of wind felt like a threat. Emily tugged on his sleeve, her voice barely audible. "Officer Reed, I heard him talking about a cabin." Marcus stopped, crouching to her level. "What kind of cabin?" "I don't know," Emily said, her voice trembling. "He said it was safe there, that no one would find us." Marcus's mind raced. A cabin would make sense. Isolated, easy to hide in. He reached for his radio, but realized with a sinking feeling that it had been damaged in the scuffle. "Okay," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're going to find Sarah and get you to safety. Then we'll deal with him." As they neared the edge of the forest, Marcus spotted the faint beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. Sarah's voice called out, "Marcus? Emily? We're here." Marcus shouted back, his voice echoing through the trees. Sarah appeared moments later, her face a mix of relief and urgency. "Are you okay?" she asked, scanning Marcus's disheveled appearance. "Ran into one of Victor's guys," Marcus said. "He got away." But Emily overheard something about a cabin. Sarah frowned. "There's a hunting cabin about 5 miles from here. It's registered to one of Victor's relatives." Marcus nodded. "Then that's where we go next." "Not without backup," Sarah said firmly. "There's no time," Marcus insisted. "He's on the move, and if we wait, he'll vanish." Sarah hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but we stick together." They reached the edge of the forest where their vehicles were parked. Sarah stayed with Emily, calming her and ensuring she felt safe, while Marcus radioed for additional units. "You're doing great, Emily," Sarah said gently. "You're so brave." Emily nodded, though her grip on her doll remained tight. "I just want to go home." "You will," Sarah promised. "We'll make sure of it." Marcus approached, his face set with determination. "Help is on the way." "But Sarah, we need to get to that cabin now." Sarah glanced at Emily, then back at Marcus. "All right, but if things go south, we pull out." "Understood?" "Understood," Marcus said. He knelt in front of Emily. "Stay here with the officers, okay? We'll come back for you." "Promise?" Emily asked, her voice small. "I promise," Marcus said. "You're safe now." As they drove toward the cabin, Marcus's mind raced. Every second felt like an eternity, but one thing was clear. He wouldn't stop until this nightmare was over. The precinct buzzed with quiet urgency as Marcus and Sarah escorted Emily into the station. The girl clung to Marcus's hand, her wide eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. "Emily," Sarah said gently, crouching to meet her gaze, "we're going to call your parents and get you home. You're safe now." Emily nodded, but didn't let go of Marcus. Her small hand trembled in his, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. "I'll stay close," Marcus said softly, looking at Sarah. "You handle the family call." Sarah stood and gestured for an officer to guide Emily to the lounge. Marcus watched her go, his chest tight. The image of her fearful eyes lingered as he turned to Sarah. "We need to start processing Langston's belongings," Marcus said, his voice edged with determination. "If there's a lead, I want it now." In the evidence room, Marcus and Sarah sifted through Victor Langston's confiscated items. The tension was palpable as Marcus opened a leather satchel, revealing neatly organized files, fake IDs, and a small, unassuming notebook. "What's this?" Sarah asked, peering over his shoulder. Marcus flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. The notebook was filled with handwritten codes and numbers, interspersed with what looked like initials and dates. "This isn't just a ledger," Marcus said, his voice low. "It's a record. Transactions, movements. It's all here." Sarah's face darkened as she scanned the entries. These initials could be kids. The dates. "Marcus, these are timelines. Look, this one matches Emily's disappearance." Marcus's jaw tightened. "If this is what I think it is, Langston isn't working alone. This is a network." His mind raced as he studied the patterns. Some entries included cryptic notes, locations, aliases. And then, a name jumped out at him. L.R. "Lila Reed," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Sarah froze, glancing at him. "Marcus, are you sure?" "It's her initials. And the date. It lines up with when she disappeared." His hands clenched the notebook. She was part of this. In the interrogation room, Victor Langston sat across from Sarah, his polished demeanor intact despite his circumstances. His cuffed hands rested casually on the table, and his smile was faint but mocking. "Why don't we skip the pleasantries, Mr. Langston?" Sarah said, her tone ice cold. "We know you're involved in something far bigger than a single abduction." Victor raised an eyebrow. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "I've told you. Emily is my daughter." Marcus, watching through the one-way mirror, bristled. He could feel the weight of his frustration pressing against his chest. Sarah leaned forward, placing the ledger on the table. "This says otherwise. We found it in your possession. Care to explain the codes? The initials? The transactions?" Victor's smile faltered for the first time. "I don't know what that is," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Sure you don't," Sarah said dryly, "because innocent men always carry detailed logs of trafficking activity." Marcus stepped into the room, his sharp hazel eyes locked on Victor. We're not playing games, Langston. This ends now. Who else is involved? Where are the other children? Victor's gaze flicked to Marcus, his smirk returning. You've got it all wrong, Officer Reed. You're chasing ghosts. Marcus's temper flared, and Sarah quickly intervened. We'll see how smug you are when this goes to court, she said, standing. Let's go, Marcus. As Victor remained silent, attention turned to the man Marcus had subdued in the woods. The accomplice sat in a smaller interrogation room, visibly nervous. Sweat dripped down his brow, and his leg bounced under the table. Listen, Sarah said, her tone firm but measured. Your friend Langston won't protect you. If you cooperate, maybe we can work something out. The man hesitated, his gaze darting to the door. I don't know much, he mumbled. I'm just a driver. Marcus leaned forward. You were in the woods with a knife. That's not just a driver. Who are you working for? The man swallowed hard. I don't know his name, okay? They call him the broker. He's the one running everything. Victor. Victor's just a middleman. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sarah. The broker. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Where can we find him? Marcus demanded. I don't know. The man insisted, panic in his voice. Victor's the only one who talks to him. I swear. Back in the evidence room, Marcus stared at the ledger, his mind racing. The accomplice's information had confirmed one thing. This was bigger than Victor Langston. The broker was the real target. Here, Sarah said, pointing to an entry in the notebook. This address. It's listed multiple times. Could be a meeting point. Marcus studied the location. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the neighboring city. His gut told him this was their next move. Let's go, he said, grabbing his jacket. Sarah placed a hand on his arm. Marcus, we need backup for this. If the broker's there, we can't risk going in blind. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. You're right. Let's do it by the book. As they prepared for the raid, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this lead would take him one step closer to both saving more children and uncovering the truth about Lila. The sound of boots hitting concrete echoed as Marcus, Sarah, and the task force entered the dark warehouse. The air was thick with dust and tension, the faint smell of oil and decay permeating the space. Flashlights cut through the dim light, illuminating crates, scattered papers, and eerie silence. Clear this area, Sarah ordered, gesturing to a group of officers. Reed, check the back rooms. Marcus nodded, his hand resting on his holstered gun. He moved swiftly, his flashlight sweeping over the disarray. His heart pounded as he opened a heavy door, revealing a room filled with overturned chairs and abandoned equipment. Got something? An officer called from the far side of the warehouse. Marcus rushed over, finding a desk cluttered with documents and a map pinned to the wall. Sarah joined him, her sharp eyes scanning the material. This isn't just a warehouse, she said, pulling down the map. Look at these routes. These are transport paths. They've been moving kids across state lines. Marcus's jaw tightened. And they've been careful. No signs of the children here. Sarah flipped through a stack of papers. We've got names, aliases, and dates. This could blow the whole operation wide open. Back at the precinct, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at a name on one of the documents. Lila Reed. His sister's name, scribbled among other names and dates. The document suggested she had been moved multiple times after her abduction. Sarah entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. She set one down in front of him. You've been staring at that paper for an hour. It's her, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. She's connected to this. Sarah pulled up a chair. We always knew this might lead back to her. But if she's still alive, this is the closest we've ever been. Marcus shook his head. She was just a kid, Sarah. They moved her around like cargo. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. We're not going to let that happen to anyone else. And we're going to find her. Victor Langston sat across from Marcus in the interrogation room, his smug demeanor slipping. The evidence from the warehouse had cracked his polished facade, and his hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette. "I told you," Victor muttered. "I don't know where the kids are." Marcus slammed a folder onto the table, spilling its contents, photos of the maps, routes, and documents found at the warehouse. "You don't get to play dumb, Langston," Marcus snapped. "This is your operation. These routes, these names, they lead back to you." Victor leaned back, feigning calm. "If you think I'm the one running this, you're even more clueless than I thought." "Then give us a name," Sarah interjected, her tone icy. "Who's the broker?" Victor's eyes flickered with hesitation, but he said nothing. Marcus leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're protecting someone? They're not coming for you, Langston. You're a loose end now." Victor exhaled slowly, his confidence wavering. "You don't understand how deep this goes. Even if I told you, it wouldn't matter." Marcus and Sarah pored over the documents from the warehouse, searching for any clue that might lead to the children or the broker. A marked location caught Marcus's eye: an abandoned hunting cabin in a remote area. "This keeps coming up," he said, pointing to the map. "If the broker's running things, this could be a meeting point." Sarah studied the map. "It's isolated enough to avoid attention. If they're keeping kids there, we need to move fast." Marcus grabbed his jacket. "Let's go." "Wait," Sarah said, blocking his path. "We need backup." "There's no time," Marcus argued. "Every second we wait, those kids are in danger." Sarah held his gaze for a long moment before sighing. "Fine, but if we're doing this, we're doing it smart." The cabin loomed in the moonlight, its dilapidated exterior shrouded in overgrown brush. Marcus and Sarah approached cautiously, their weapons drawn. The faint sound of a generator hummed in the distance. Marcus signaled for Sarah to check the perimeter while he moved toward the door. His heart pounded as he pushed it open, revealing a small, cluttered interior. The air was thick with mildew and something metallic. Inside, a desk sat against the far wall, covered in papers and a single laptop. Marcus's flashlight landed on a photo, an image of Lila as a teenager. His breath caught in his throat. "Marcus," Sarah called from outside. "You need to see this." He stepped out to find her near a trapdoor partially hidden under debris. The faint sound of voices carried up from below. "They're here," Sarah whispered. Marcus nodded, adrenaline surging. "Let's get them out." As they descended into the dark basement, the gravity of what they were about to uncover pressed heavily on Marcus's chest. The faint cries of children echoed in the distance, fueling his resolve. The precinct's interrogation room was dimly lit, the overhead bulb casting long shadows across Victor Langston's face. Marcus stared at him from the other side of the one-way mirror, his fists clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to charge in and force a confession, but Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. "Marcus, we need to focus," she said, her tone firm. "Emily is safe. We've made progress. But if you let this get personal, we could lose everything." "It is personal," Marcus muttered, not taking his eyes off Victor. "This isn't just about Emily anymore. This is about Lila." Sarah stepped in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. "And what happens if you let Lila's case overshadow the rest of this? We've uncovered a massive operation here. If you lose focus, we risk blowing it all." Marcus hesitated, his mind warring between duty and revenge. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "You're right, but I can't let Lila slip through my fingers again." Inside the interrogation room, Sarah sat across from Victor, her expression unreadable. "You're in deep, Langston. The evidence we have could bury you for life. But if you cooperate, maybe we can cut you a deal." Victor leaned back, his smirk faltering. "You don't scare me. I've seen worse than you." Sarah arched an eyebrow. "Maybe, but I know your type, Victor. All charm and no spine. You think the broker will protect you? He's probably already cutting ties, leaving you to take the fall." Victor's eyes flickered with something, a crack in his confidence. "You don't know what you're talking about." Sarah leaned forward. "I know the broker doesn't care about you, but if you help us bring him down, you might still walk out of here alive." Victor's jaw tightened. "Even if I talk, you won't find him. He's always 2 steps ahead." From behind the mirror, Marcus caught the fear in Victor's voice. He turned to the officer beside him. "Get ready. He's about to break." An hour later, Marcus and Sarah stood over a table covered in maps and files. Victor had finally talked, providing just enough information to connect the broker to a shipping yard outside the city. It wasn't much, but it was their best lead yet. "If the broker is there, he won't stay long," Sarah said, circling the location on the map. "We need to move now." Marcus nodded. "We'll take a tactical team. No risks, no mistakes." Sarah hesitated. "And what if Lila's not there?" Marcus's expression hardened. "Then we keep going until we find her." The shipping yard was a sprawling maze of containers and cranes, the faint hum of machinery echoing in the night. Marcus and Sarah led the team through the shadows, their weapons drawn. Every corner they turned felt like it could be an ambush. "Movement up ahead," Sarah whispered, gesturing toward a group of figures near a loading dock. Marcus nodded, signaling for the team to fan out. They moved in silence, surrounding the group. As they closed in, Marcus's heart sank. It wasn't the broker, it was a decoy. Men armed with weapons scattered, firing blindly into the night. The air exploded with noise and chaos. Marcus dove behind a container, his pulse pounding. "This was a setup," he shouted into his radio. "He knew we were coming." Sarah's voice crackled through the line. "We're holding them off, but we need to regroup." Amid the chaos, Marcus spotted a figure slipping away into the darkness. A tall man in a suit, walking with unnerving calm. The broker. Marcus abandoned cover, chasing after him. "Stop! Police!" The man turned briefly, his face obscured by shadows, before disappearing into a row of containers. Marcus followed, his gun raised, his breath heavy. By the time Marcus reached the end of the containers, the broker was gone. All that remained was an envelope, neatly placed on a crate. Marcus picked it up, his hands trembling. Inside was a single photograph, a woman with auburn hair and pale green eyes. Lila. He stared at the picture, his chest tightening. She looked older, her face etched with lines of hardship, but it was unmistakably her. Scrawled on the back was an address. Sarah found him moments later, her face grim. "We've secured the site. No sign of the broker, but we've got their communication logs." Marcus held up the photograph. "He left this for me." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's Lila." "Marcus, this address?" "It's where I'm going," Marcus interrupted, his voice steady but laced with determination. "He's baiting me, Sarah, but I don't care. I'm not waiting." Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "Then I'm coming with you." Marcus nodded, clutching the photograph tightly. "Let's finish this." The cold night air was heavy with tension as Marcus stood outside the trafficker's stronghold, a crumbling, sprawling compound hidden deep in the industrial district. Red and blue lights reflected off the nearby buildings as the task force took their positions. The plan had been meticulously laid out, but the stakes had never been higher. Sarah approached him, her voice calm but firm. "You ready for this?" Marcus tightened his grip on his weapon. "I've been ready for years." "Let's move," Sarah said, nodding to the team. The doors were breached with a deafening crash. Officers poured into the compound, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Marcus's adrenaline surged as he cleared each room. Crates filled with forged documents and untraceable phones lined the walls, but the real targets weren't in sight. Second floor, an officer shouted, "We've got movement." Marcus sprinted up the stairs, his heart pounding. The sound of footsteps echoed above him. He burst into a room and froze. Dozens of frightened children huddled together, their wide eyes darting to the armed officers. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, lowering his weapon. "You're safe now." As the children were escorted to safety, Marcus's attention snapped to a locked door at the end of the hallway. Something about it felt different. He signaled to Sarah, who joined him. "This is it," Marcus said, his voice taut with emotion. Sarah nodded, and together they forced the door open. The room was dimly lit, the faint hum of a heater filling the silence. Sitting on a worn mattress was a woman with auburn hair, her head bowed. She flinched at the intrusion, but slowly looked up. Marcus's breath caught. "Lila." Her pale green eyes met his, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Tears welled in her eyes as recognition dawned. "Marcus." He crossed the room in 2 strides, falling to his knees in front of her. "It's me. I'm here." Lila hesitated, her hands trembling, before throwing her arms around him. "I thought I'd never see you again." "You're safe now," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm not letting you go." The precinct buzzed with activity as the rescued children were processed, their families notified. Victor Langston sat in a holding cell, his once smug demeanor replaced by a hollow stare. His accomplices had turned on him, providing enough evidence to ensure he'd never see the outside world again. Sarah leaned against the doorway of Marcus's office. "Langston and his crew are finished. Life sentences across the board." Marcus nodded, staring at the files on his desk. "It's a start." Sarah frowned. "What's bothering you?" "This operation was just one piece," Marcus said, his voice heavy. "There are more out there. More kids who might never come home." "You can't save everyone, Marcus," Sarah said gently. "But you saved these kids. You found Lila. That counts for something." Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of years of guilt lifting slightly. "I just wish it didn't take so long." A week later, Marcus found himself standing on the front porch of the Harper home. Emily's mother, Claire, opened the door, her face lighting up with gratitude. "Officer Reed," she said warmly. "Please come in." Marcus stepped inside, his gaze falling on Emily. She was sitting on the floor, playing with her doll, her face brighter than he'd ever seen it. When she noticed him, she ran over, throwing her arms around his waist. "Officer Reed," she exclaimed. "I'm starting school again soon." Marcus smiled, crouching to her level. "That's wonderful, Emily. I'm so proud of you." Claire joined them, her voice thick with emotion. "We can never thank you enough for what you did." "You don't have to," Marcus said simply. "Just keep her safe." Emily looked up at him with wide eyes. "You're my hero." Marcus's chest tightened, and he ruffled her hair gently. "You're the brave one, Emily." The park was quiet as Marcus sat on a bench, watching children laugh and play. Lila sat beside him, her presence both comforting and bittersweet. She had a long road of healing ahead, but for the first time in years, they were together. "Do you think it's over?" Lila asked softly, her gaze on the swings. "No," Marcus admitted, "but it's a start." Lila nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "You never gave up on me." "Never," Marcus said, his voice steady. "And I'm not done yet. There are more out there, Lila. More kids who need help." Lila turned to him, her pale green eyes filled with determination. "Then let's find them." Marcus looked at her, a sense of purpose reigniting in his chest. Together, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus felt a quiet resolve settle over him. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. And that was enough to keep him going. What would you do if you found yourself in Officer Marcus Reed's shoes, faced with impossible choices that could alter lives forever? This story, though fictional, echoes the harsh reality of countless children and families torn apart by the darkness of trafficking. It's a haunting reminder of the bravery it takes to face evil head-on and the sacrifices required to pursue justice. Do you think you could make the same choices Marcus did? Would you risk everything for the chance to save just one life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this story captivating, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Join us as we explore more tales of courage, resilience, and humanity's fight against the odds. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future uploads, and thank you for being a part of this journey. Let's keep these important conversations alive.